So it is enough for us to engage them in discussion about their own beliefs to show the ludicrous nature of it. There are other issues that come up which have to do with why they feel that Jesus was God or the Son of God. And the arguments they use for it are all refutable. There are answers to all of their arguments. Sometimes they argue that he was the Son of God because it is mentioned in the Gospels or in the writings of Paul that he was the Son of God. Not by him, but by others. So they say, there it is. But we show them that the term Son of God has been used to refer to Abraham, to Adam, to David, to all kinds of prophets of the past. That really in Hebrew this just meant one close to God. But they say, some of them will say, but Son of God here when referring to Jesus is with capital S. Capital S. So we say to them, there is no capitals in Hebrew or Greek, which the New Testament is written in. There are no capitals. So this is only something English translators made up. Otherwise, they use the miracles of Jesus. Feeding the multitudes, curing the lepers, making the blind see, raising the dead. However, you can go and find all of these things done by prophets of the Old Testament. That's mentioned in page 96 of your notes. There's a comparison there. So you have references for everything Jesus did.
He was the begotten Son.
If they say begotten Son, you also find reference to Israel as being the begotten Son of God also. So even the term begotten is not unique to Jesus. Now, the other thing that we try to bring them to is they as Christians claiming to follow Jesus. We say that really you are not following Jesus. You are following the ways that Paul taught. The way of Jesus was different from what you do. The way of Jesus is what Muslims do today. Muslims pray as Jesus prayed. You can give them references where Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, it's in your notes here, fell down on his face and prayed. And it's mentioned in the Old Testament that Moses did the same. Abraham did the same. David did the same, falling down on their face in prayer. We do that. You don't. You kneel and clasp your hands. Right? You don't pray as he did. And if you're in an area, I don't know where it's common amongst Christians here in India, whether they circumcise or not. Right? In many parts of the Christian world, they don't circumcise. So you can point out to them that it is mentioned in the New Testament that Jesus was circumcised on the 8th day. In Luke 2 verse 21, Jesus was circumcised on the 8th day. And that's problematic also when you think of him being God. God was circumcised? Yeah, you really have to shut your brain off to get past these, Anyway, Jesus didn't eat pork. But most Christians today love pork. In the Christian world, the pig is elevated. He is mentioned in their nursery rhymes. 3 little piggies went to market. He is in their movies. They eat Babe in the movies. They love the pig. But Jesus cast out the demons into the pig. That's what you have in your Gospels. Also, you can find ablution, that the prophets in the Old Testament, they followed the methods of ablution. The women were veiled. You have all that kind of evidence. Fasting, Jesus fasted for 40 days and nights. Christians don't do that anymore. Jesus and his followers used to greet each other. Salam alaikum, shalom aleichem. But you all greet each other hi and everything else. Interest was forbidden. but you practice incest. Polygamy was allowed, but you have prohibited polygamy, etc., etc., etc. You know, so Christianity, as we know it today, basically what you want to establish for them is it was not the religion of Jesus. It is a religion which has evolved and changed and has become something quite different from what Jesus taught and what he brought. I think we'll stop here. I think the adhan, what time is the adhan going? 1:10. Okay, we take a couple of questions before the adhan. Somebody has any questions on Christianity? Dawah? So when is it going to be given? Okay. Anyway, you can ask a few questions now.
I had a dawah with a Christian roommate of mine.
$2:30. Okay, go ahead.
He told me that Moses was given revelation in the mountain of Tua in the form of fire. God was in the form of fire, he's telling.
Was in form of?
Fire.
Fire?
Yeah, Moses was told to remove his shoes.
From the blessed ground?
Yeah, and God talked to him in the form of fire.
No, he talked from a bush that was burning.
Yeah, that's what he's telling.
But not that he talked to him in the form of fire.
Yeah, that's what he's telling. Bush that is burning.
Yeah,
so he has come in form. He's telling me like that. And he's telling so Jesus came in the form of sun.
No, we say God spoke from a burning bush. He didn't come in the form of fire. That's their misinterpretation. Question from the sisters on Christianity? Any questions you'd like to raise from your dawah if you've been speaking with Christians? Issues? No? Go ahead.
It's been said in Genesis that God has created man in his own form.
In his image.
Yeah, of course, in his image.
It's mentioned in his image, yes. And this is the source of misguidance for Christian tradition. That's why they paint God looking like a man. In their paintings and carvings, icons, they represent God as a human being, claiming that he created man in his image, meaning he must look like a man. This is why they have also attributed to him other weaknesses, like sleeping on the seventh day after getting tired from creating the world in 6. You know, and these we point out as being errors in which they have attributed to God human weaknesses.
How shall we answer them?
As I said, that this is a mistake. This is a mistake. You have made God like human beings. This is not the original teachings of the prophets.
Can we say to the persons who says that Jesus is Son of God? It's read in Matthew that blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called as Son of God.
Yeah, children of God, yes. Yes, that this title, children of God, sons and daughters of God, have been applied to people who are close to God. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
We have in our country a minority of Orthodox. But unfortunately those people...
Minority of?
Orthodox.
Orthodox Christians, okay.
Yeah. And their book is written by a language called Ge'ez. It is initiated in Yemen. But unfortunately, no one knows that language. Even their priests, they don't know it. And when you will argue them, they'll tell, we don't know. This is known by the priest. Even if you met the priest, he don't know the language. And how we deal with those people?
Well, the only thing you can deal with is from a logical perspective. You know, if they believe that Jesus is the Son of God, then we try to logically show them how he couldn't be. You can't argue from Scripture if they don't even know their own Scripture and they can't read it.
Thank you.
Inshallah.
What about these Dead Sea Scrolls?
Dead Sea Scrolls really don't shed any light on Christianity, because the writings were prior to the time of Christ.
So, one Christian asked me about jihad. How do I explain it to him in the context of their crusades?
Explaining jihad in the context of crusades?
Yes, comparison or something.
Well, it's not the same at all. I mean, the crusades...
is there any evidence we can,
No, what we can say is that you can show in the Old Testament that Moses, his people, were commanded to fight other people, and they fought against them, pagans, etc., conquered them, and show that there are many, many commands there in the Old Testament with regards to fighting at God's command, right? And in fact, when you look at the stories that are mentioned in the Old Testament about fighting, they involve instructions which are very cruel. Massacring, yes, men, women, and children, killing even their animals, burning down their homes, total. So you have things which are far worse, in terms of what may be called their holy wars, than what is even attributed to Muslims. Pardon? Yeah, you can use those to show that, if a Christian is trying to make an issue about jihad, look in your own book, Before you talk about the splinter in my eye, look at the log in yours. Right? Let somebody else who hasn't asked.
Okay. What about this gospel according to Barnabas? They don't accept it?
Well, we can't argue from the gospel according to Barnabas, because its authenticity is questionable. But it's like the other gospels. At least we can say there is reference to the gospel of Barnabas. It might be something of a curiosity to some Christians, but in general, mainstream Christians don't accept it as being authentic. So it's difficult to argue from it. And we ourselves don't accept it as authentic, because it contains many things that we don't believe in and agree with. Though it does contain mention of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
That's all? In order to give a convincing reply, we need to first understand the intention of the questioner. So can you give us any tips on exactly how to understand the intention of the questioner? Any tips on that?
How to understand the
intention of the questioner?
Well, you understand the intent of the questioner by asking further questions to the questioner to determine where he or she is coming from. I mean, that's how. I mean, I can't give you tips, because you'd have to identify the question. What is the question that they asked? Give me an example. Give me an example of a question. No, I'm just saying, for you to identify the intent of the questioner, you have to look at the question itself. Are they seeking information? Or are they just trying to ridicule you or whatever? Sometimes it's clear in the voice, in their face, how it is said. Sometimes it becomes clear when you ask them further questions. So there's no one way to determine what their intent is.
Okay, but then we have to maintain our mood of answering, isn't it? Because I met one particular person who asked me once that in Islam, who are the women who have been there's an allegation against them. So since I had this answer from an alim, I said there are two such women who have been put false allegation against. He was actually referring to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. So I said there are two, Maryam alayhi salam and Aisha radiallahu anha. The intention was to ridicule actually. He wanted to put Muslims down. Said who is the woman in Islam who has been put against whom the allegation was put on the character. So the intention is such that they try to instigate anger in us. So what is the mood? We have to still maintain the cool and calmness, or how is it?
Yes, of course. Of course. We don't sink to their level, of ignorance. And even in our own presentations, we should try to avoid ridiculing them. Whatever we say, you know, as ridiculous as it might sound, we try to do it with a straight face, you know, not smiling as you say it, right? So they feel that they're being ridiculed. But you say it with a straight face and put it in good terms, which doesn't involve ridicule.
Brother, how to answer the Protestants and the friends which I have?
In the mic, speak in the mic.
Yeah, friends which I have, which they say that your community have so many sects, so you go and correct them, not us. How to answer these questions?
Well, of course, that statement, your community has so many sects, you better go fix them up before coming to us. This is, you know, this is one of ridicule. This is a question of, or statement of ridicule. So something like that, you can respond by saying, at least the sects that we have all follow the same Quran. Your sects have different Bibles. I mean, if it comes to this point, you know, it may be a point of education to them, because they may say, no, we have only one Bible. You say, no, you don't. Come with me, let's go to the Catholic church, get the Bible and have a look. And go and look at yours. And that could be a revelation for them, to shake them, to let them open up their eyes and say, okay, maybe you do have something here.
Sister's chance.
Sisters, go ahead.
They say that Jesus is the Son of God, and he healed the lepers, he caused the blind to see, etc. And he died for our sins, I mean their sins. How do we explain to them that that's not the case?
Well, you have mentioned that he cured the leper and he raised the dead. We don't have to say that this wasn't the case, because it was the case. So really what you're talking about is only
about his crucifixion.
Crucifixion. Yeah, this is the common mispronunciation amongst you, yeah? Crucifixion. It's not crucifixion, but crucifixion. Well, the issue of crucifixion, if we're going to argue, I mean, we believe it didn't take place, they believe it took place. There are arguments you raised by Ahmed Deedat and others, which seem to indicate that even that story is questionable. And even the issue of him fulfilling the story of Noah, story of, is it Noah? No, of Jonah, sorry, story of Jonah. Right, that as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be, etc. This is one of the arguments that they use. And that's clear to show them that even according to their own text, Jesus was not, according to their text, you know, dead for 3 days and 3 nights, as they attribute to Jonah. So we can show from the text that they have that they're not consistent with the claim that they make. But in the end, we have to focus on the fact of who Jesus was. Who was Jesus? That's a more important issue. Because if he was God, then you have a problem of God being crucified and dying. If he was a man of God, then you have the problem of what is attributed to him, of what he said. Asking God to take the cup away from him. Indicate, why have you forsaken me? And very difficult to say, this is a man of God saying to God, why have you forsaken me? You know, so there are problems either way you look at it. So I would try to take them through that, focusing on who was Jesus.
Brother, due to my experience, I found that there are some groups who say that Jesus is the prophet, he is not the God. Plus, they say he will return. And
That's our belief.
and they also believe also. There are some certain groups in Christian. So they say when we believe what you believe. So let's stop this debate and all. When Jesus will come, then he'll let him decide what is true. So how to deal that person at that moment?
Well, we'll say to that person that if you say that Jesus was a prophet, those sects that claim that Jesus was a prophet of God, he wasn't the Son of God, and that he will come again, as we do, we'll say to them that really, according to Christians, you are not a Christian. You're not a Christian. So if you're not a Christian, best you become a Muslim who share the same belief that you do. Your beliefs are Muslim beliefs, not Christian beliefs. Today's Christianity. So best you join us and come into the whole truth. You have a part of the truth, but you don't have the whole truth. You're still stuck with the Bible, with all the changes and corruptions and things like this, which you admit is there. It's there in your translations. So why don't you come to the book that has no other versions, no changes, and so on and so forth.
Jazakallah.
Zana Yaqub.
Excuse me, brother.
From the sisters, go ahead.
A lot of people say that, a lot of people question us about how can you say that God put someone else in Jesus' place? How can he be so unfair that he just made someone else die in order to save his prophet?
Okay, that's for those people who fell into the trap of saying that God put somebody else on the cross in the place of Jesus. We don't know that. So this is a mistake to say. It doesn't mention that in the Quran at all. All the Quran says is shubbiha lahum. It was made to seem that way to them. How? We don't know. If you wanted to talk about that with them through the Gospel of Barnabas, according to the Gospel of Barnabas, the one on whom Jesus' likeness was put and who ended up on the cross was none other than Judas. Judas, who sold him over to be killed. So it would seem to be a fitting reward for that traitor, if you wanted to go down that road. But we say really, we don't know how it took place. So if we convey that information accurately, we don't fall into that trap.
This question is on behalf of my friend. His roommate is a Christian, and he discussed with this religion, and he's given the dawah and everything. But this person, he agreed Quran, which is came from Allah, and he believes that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a messenger of Allah. But when we discuss with this crucifixion case, crucifixion, he never believed that. He never accept that. He says that the crucifixion was done by is Jesus. Now the dawah is stopped there, and can you suggest that how we can proceed with this?
Well, if he believes in the Quran, and the Quran says that Jesus wasn't crucified, you have a problem here. How can he believe in the Quran? The Quran said he wasn't crucified, yet he says he believes that he was crucified. There's contradiction here. So you have to pin him on belief in the Quran. You believe in the Quran, why do you believe in the Quran? You know, because he may be only saying that for argument's sake.
No, he don't know much about the Quran.
Yeah.
But basically he knows something about it.
Okay,
On the basis
so he needs to read the Quran. Let him truly believe in the Quran. Let him read the Quran, let it enter into his heart, and then when it becomes a realization in his mind and his heart that the Quran really is from God, then take him to the verse where it says he was not crucified. From the sisters. Okay, this is the last question then from the brothers. We'll stop here. Go ahead.
Okay, a few days ago I was discussing with a Christian about the sonship of Jesus. And when he started that, I started with the popular statement of Sheikh Didat that God has sons by tons and all that. I started quoting the names of all the sons which God has. Then he said that Jesus is uncreated, whereas all others are created. Now, how do I answer that? I know about Melchizedek, but nowhere does it says that Melchizedek is uncreated. It says no beginning of days, no end of days.
That's what uncreated means.
Okay.
Uncreated means without beginnings of days.
Okay.
So we ask him, was Jesus born?
Right. No, they agree that Jesus was born.
Okay.
But
if he was born as a baby, there was a time when he wasn't a baby. Right?
Okay.
There was a time when he wasn't a baby, then he became a baby. Does God change?
No, he's eternal. Absolute.
God is absolute and eternal. He doesn't change. He doesn't grow. He doesn't become. God is God. So this is where we would take him back to. That if Jesus was eternal, meaning that he was God, then there is no growing. There's no dependence. There's no circumcision. There's no drinking milk from the breast of his mother. This is not God. This is a man.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to...
Sometimes when we are on the internet, you come across, mostly it is Hindus, sometimes even Christians. They use blasphemous language. Normally I come out of the room. But is that the right approach?
To join them in their blasphemy?
No. How to tackle that?
Well,
shall we continue with the dawah or come out?
Well, you continue.
The moment they come to know that we are Muslims, I am a Muslim, they try to attack, maybe say something about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Well, the point is that if you are able to continue your dawah, then you do so. If it's just a snide remark here and there, you ignore it and continue with your dawah, you can do that fine. But if your dawah becomes distorted and it just becomes a matter of responding to their blasphemous or insulting remarks, then it's better to just leave it. But as long as you're able to continue your dawah, it's better to continue, because what their intention was to shut you down. So when you left, you did what they wanted you to do. So if you can hang in there and just keep getting your point across, then it's better. I think we need to stop now. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. I take it you've got your papers now. I see some of you have it in your hands. There are copies. Not everybody got copies. There was a shortage of copies. Is that what? Not enough copies were made? Huh? Okay, we'll check and confirm for you. Anyway, the final exam, the exam tomorrow, it will be in the format of the questions which come in the end of each of the chapters. And each chapter, each section has a series of questions, 5 or 6 questions, which are multiple choice, just so that you have an idea of how the questions are. So in order to prepare yourself for the exam, I would advise you to go through all of these questions. If you're able to answer them, inshallah, you should be able to do well on the exam. The timing for the exam, we need to get that confirmed. Inshallah, by the end of our program at Maghrib, we should have a timing confirmed for you. I mean, I would imagine that the it would be, the best time would be in the morning, right? Tomorrow is Sunday. I think the best time would probably be in the morning. We'll just try to set a time for you. The exam will be 1 hour. It's a 1 hour exam. You do it and then carry on with your programs. So, but we'll get a confirmation as to what time is the best time. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem. Wa ala ali wa ashabi. Wa man istanna bi sunnati li yawmiddin. All praise is due to Allah. May Allah's peace and blessings be on the last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. We basically finished in the last session the particular information that we needed to know for da'wah to Christians. And that's, of course, basic information. I've given you some basic ideas, etc. Once you get involved, then the requirements may increase. You may find that that information is not enough. What may work on one person or two people may not work on many others. So you have to get further information. So before going into the questions, the practical, we need to do a little bit of a practical here now before going on to our next topic, Da'wah to Hindus. There is a question that is commonly asked with regards to Da'wah, where it involves reading the books of other religions, etc. There are some texts which have even indicated that this is not permissible. Da'wah according to Quran and Sunnah. Right? This is a book, hardcover book printed by Dar es Salaam. The author in it declared that reading Christian texts, the Gospels or the Old Testament, is haram, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on one occasion saw Umar ibn al-Khattab reading some leaves from the Torah, and he became very angry with him, and he said that if Moses was here, if Prophet Musa was here, he would have no recourse but to follow what I brought. Right? So from that, the author concluded that it is not permissible. And others have made this statement also. However, if we look at the tradition of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, till our time, we can find many examples from among the Sahaba and those who came after them, where they quoted texts from the books of the Christians and the Jews. They read other texts. From the examples that we know, Umar ibn al-Khattab told the soldiers, Muslim soldiers who were going into Persia, that they should treat the Zoroastrians as people of the book, having discerned what was inside of their book, finding out that in their book, the Avesta, it has many things similar to what we have in the Quran and the Sunnah. So he told them, based on his knowledge of their book, that they should treat them as people of the book, except that if they find any of them married to their mothers or their daughters or their sisters, that they should annul those marriages. Okay? We also have among the Sahaba Ka'b al-Akhbar, who was a Jew who converted to Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ used to turn to him on different occasions and ask him for references from the book, the Torah, which was being used by the Jews. And remember the occasion when the Prophet ﷺ was to punish a woman who had committed adultery, and they came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked for his judgment, and he told them to judge according to what is in their book. And they said they would bring their book and read. He told them to bring their book and read. And when the rabbi was reading, he covered a portion, right? And this is Prophet ﷺ having the Jews read to him from their book. He covered a portion, and Ka'b told the Prophet ﷺ, have him lift up his hand and read what is under his hand. You see? And we know in the narrations of tafsir from Abdullah ibn Abbas and others of the Sahaba, they quoted information which came from the Torah, the Injil, the books of the Christians and the Jews. And these have been compiled in the earliest tafsir of At-Tabari. Tabari, whose tafsir, known as Tafsir Tabari, is the most classical tafsir. He includes in it many narrations from the Sahaba. Not all of them are authentic. And even Ibn Kathir, you will find mentioning narrations which come from the Torah and the Injil. These are usually referred to as Israeliyat. And later scholars of tafsir ruled that they should not be included in the tafsir, you know. But it is still narrated information which was narrated from that early generation, from those sources. And we have scholars from the time of Abu Hanifa and others writing, proving false the books of the Christians and the Jews. Among them Ibn Rushd, who wrote in Spain, one of the great scholars of Spain from the Maliki school of thought. He wrote the famous book Bidayat al-Mujtahid, which we study in Medina. He wrote a book in refutation of the Christians and the Gospels. So did Ibn Taymiyyah, who came after him, and so did Ibn al-Qayyim. So we know that in the tradition of the scholars of the past, they did take information from the books of the Christians and the Jews and others and use it as part of their refutation of their ideas. So this is studying their books for aid in refuting their ideas. So, if we come back to the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab, as it was understood by the majority of scholars, is that what was meant here was for Umar ibn al-Khattab to read the Torah seeking guidance. For us to say, I'm going to go read the Old Testament or read the Gospels to seek guidance, to know Allah better, this is misguidance. This is misguidance. This is wrong. If we want to know Allah, we should know Him through the Quran and the Sunnah. These are our sources. So this is what is the requirement for us. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ was upset about. That Omar was reading the book seeking guidance, seeking knowledge, beneficial knowledge for himself. So the Prophet ﷺ clarified for him, no. Anything that's beneficial is already in the Quran. Even Musa, if he came now, had to follow this book. So that is the point. We don't go to these texts seeking guidance, but to go to these texts to gather information which we will use in our da'wah, right? Meaning, as we explain Islam to non-Muslims, we can take references from their books to support what we're saying. We say, this is the case, and it is even mentioned in your book. There is perfectly no harm in that. It's perfectly legitimate. Just want to clarify that point. Now, we will go on to the practical. I'll just pick out some questions from the da'wah to the Christians. Who is going to answer? We can start with the sisters. I think probably by now most of the sisters have already answered. If there's any sister who hasn't answered, could they take the mic now? If not, we can start back around again to somebody who answered once. Now is your second opportunity. First question. Most Christians believe that Jesus' birth of a virgin is proof he was God. How would you explain to them that this is not the case?
You can say God is the creator of everything. So how can Jesus be born? That's all.
Come again, please.
God creates everything. And how can God be created? That's what I can say.
Well, the simple response to this one, if they say Jesus' virgin birth is proof he was God, we say to them, what about Eve? Eve was born without a mother. What about Adam? He was born without a father and mother. What would they be if Jesus was a God because he didn't have a father? That is the simple answer. Right? Next question. One of the brothers. Okay.
Virgin birth. The question is, most Christians believe that Jesus' birth of a virgin is proof that he was God.
Yes.
So it doesn't mention that it's without father here.
Well, that's what virgin birth means. When they say the virgin birth, Christian terminology, virgin birth, what is a virgin? A virgin is a woman who has not had sexual relations. If a woman who hasn't had sexual relations gives birth, then we're talking about a child born without a father.
Because normally we don't use this terminology.
Well, that's what it means. Okay? That's what it means. And that's what in Christian terminology it means. A virgin birth, meaning a virgin giving birth to a child. Meaning there was no husband, no male involved. Right? Next question. One of the brothers, go ahead. Now, one who hasn't answered, okay, because we have still plenty of brothers around here who have not answered any questions. Okay, come. You haven't answered anything? You haven't answered any question? Okay, come ahead. Sometimes it may be said that Christians worship God out of love and devotion, while Muslims worship ritually and out of obligation. How would you correct this misunderstanding?
Obligation.
Most Christians worship God out of love and devotion. Love and devotion. They always stress that God is love. So they worship him out of love and devotion. Whereas Muslims worship him ritually and out of obligation. You are obliged to worship him.
Love itself is a creation. Love itself is a created thing. It's a feeling. No. Even Muslims, we love Allah, that is God, more than they. So we also love God and worship. But there is a way to worship. So that seem to be for them as a rituals. So
okay.
It doesn't mean that we are obliged to worship.
No, we are obliged to worship.
But love is there. So that doesn't seem to them.
Okay. It's a good point you made. We stress to them that we also worship out of love and devotion. It is there also. But there is the additional obligation. We can stress to them that Jesus used to worship 3 times a day. This was the way of the Jews. They worshipped in the morning, in the midday, and in the night. They worshipped 3 times a day. Fixed 3 times a day. So, setting times of worship doesn't make it merely obligation and ritual, because Jesus also did it. This is what we can take back to them. Furthermore, we can point out to them if you are only going to turn to worship God when you have this loving feeling, etc., right? And you must admit you don't have the loving feeling all the time. Maybe you don't have the loving feeling today, so you don't worship God. Maybe this week you don't have that loving feeling, so you don't worship God. Maybe the month goes by, you still don't have the loving feeling, so you don't worship God. Then maybe a year goes by, years may go by, and you never have that loving feeling, so what? So you never worship God? And when is it that you actually worship God? When calamity strikes. This is the time. Yes, as soon as calamity strikes, yes, there you are, oh God, oh God, oh God. See? And that's what happens to most people, that they worship God at the time of calamity. So the religion of God says, no, that should not be the basis of your worship of God. Out of calamity, out of emotion, out of desperation. No, you should worship God regularly. Just as you eat regularly, you should worship regularly. And then you can go on and describe further about how Muslims, organize their day around the worship of God, and that makes sense, etc.
Sir, the obligation we are to take up in itself is a love for God, is a devotion to God's purpose.
Yes, we can add that even in accepting that obligation and fulfilling it, it is an expression of love. And isn't that really the greatest expression of love? Obedience? As we can come from that too. That obedience is the true expression from love. For if you say you love somebody, but you never worship him except for when you're in desperate situations, then what is the value of that love? Real love, you are going to worship him regularly. You're going to obey him in his commands.
We tell them that we worship him as he has told us to worship. The method is the same that he has told us to worship. And they are not doing it. Like you said, Jesus, he used to prostrate on his face, or Moses, or Abraham for that matter.
True.
We do it, and they don't do it.
We can include that. Back to the sisters. Pass the microphone, please. Anybody, don't be afraid, sisters. Just take the thing and try it, please. Somebody has it? How would you reply to a Christian who said, the way you Muslims pray is complicated while ours is so simple?
First I would ask him what is complicated about it? What is complicated about the way we pray?
Okay. They would say, you have to remember to make 2 rak'ahs in the morning, 4 at Dhuhr, 4 in the afternoon, 3 at Maghrib, 4 at Isha. Why not just make 2 every time? Or 3 every time, or 4 every time? There's complication here. It's not so easy.
Then the answer was already answered previously, the way God taught us, that's the way we worship him.
Right. So we don't go in to ask them, what do you mean by complicated? There is complications, okay? Our prayer does have a degree of complication. We can't run away from it. Can't run away from it. The reality though is, we are worshiping according to how God commanded us. Whereas you are worshiping according to how you have invented. This was not the way that Jesus worshipped. So we bring them back to their own text. Okay, back to the brothers. Brother who hasn't answered a question. If a Christian explained the Trinity by saying that you could be a father, a son, and a brother at the same time, how would you clarify this, his or her misunderstanding? They are trying to explain to you the Trinity. Right. And they say that you could be a father. You know, how is it that God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? You could be a father, you could be a son, and you could be a brother.
If the person dies, then all the three die. But going by that logic for the Trinity, we have that the Father dies, the Son dies, and the third entity also dies. So there's no one left.
Okay? Is that clear? So back to the sisters. How would you respond to the claim of many Christians that Christianity is a non-violent religion, one of love and turning the other cheek, while Islam is a violent religion?
In Islam, Islam also says that you can forgive the person. You can also you can forgive that person.
Okay.
But if you
Yeah, you point out to them that even in the verses where Allah speaks about the eye for the eye and the tooth for the tooth, that Allah says that to forgive is greater. You know, there is great reward in forgiveness. Mm-hmm.
and in Islam it says that you have to give you have to give back the same way it is. You must do it justly. You can't exceed it. If you exceed it, then you'll get punished for it. So it's better if you forgive them.
Okay, we can say here that the law of Moses was the eye for the eye and the tooth for the tooth. So the fact that that is a part of Islamic law, we call it the law of retaliation. Retaliation, doing to others as they did unto you. The law of retaliation. We say that this is not something newly invented by Islam. It is only revived by Islam. It was the law in existence in the time of Jesus, which he said he subscribed to the law. So Islam combines the retaliation from the law of Moses with the forgiveness from the law of Jesus that you all speak about. It's a combination of both. And anyway, you know, we can also mention, if you recall, as I mentioned earlier, that the Pope apologized 4 years ago. He made a public apology to the world for the violent acts of the conquistadors, the adventurers that came out of Spain and Portugal and pushed Christianity down the throats of native peoples in America, in Africa, in India, in Malaysia, etc. He made a public apology for their violent acts. So, as for saying that Christianity is a non-violent religion, we would say that were that the case, how do we explain World War I and World War II? These were Christian nations killing each other in the millions, you know, so on and so forth. There are Christians who claim that many Muslims have converted to Christianity, which is proof that Christianity is correct and superior. In what way would you reply?
Not necessarily. I feel there are more Christians who have converted to Islam than Muslims have converted to Christianity. And even if more Christians had converted to Islam, this alone does not give proof that Islam is a superior religion. Islam is a superior religion, but the fact that more Christians have converted to Islam is not proof of this fact.
Okay. There is another point which is more subtle and stronger to deal with this point. Christians have converted to Islam and Muslims have converted to Christianity. Common Christians and common Muslims. Muslims who don't know what Islam is, Christians who don't know what Christianity is. Okay, this happens from both sides. The idea of ignorant people converting doesn't prove anything. Okay? But what we have is hundreds, if not thousands, of Christian scholars, ministers, priests, bishops who have converted to Islam. We cannot find anywhere in the history of the world a single Muslim scholar who has converted to Christianity. And this proves superiority. This proves that we have the truth. Because people of knowledge of Christianity have become Muslim. But you will not find anybody of knowledge, a scholar of Islam, who has become a Christian. From the sisters. Sisters, somebody has the mic? Does somebody have the mic? Okay. If a Christian were to say to you, this is an important one, because we're going to run into it a lot. If a Christian were to say to you, I know that Jesus is God because he answered my prayers, what would your response be?
I would ask him what proof he had that it was Jesus who answered his prayers. I mean, he believes that Jesus is God, so I know he believes that Jesus is God, so he thinks Jesus answered his prayers. When I pray and if my prayers are answered, I believe Allah answered my prayers. I would ask him what proof he had that it was Jesus who answered his prayers.
Okay. He says, the proof is that when I raise my hands up and I call on Jesus, my prayers are answered. That's enough proof for me that he is the one answering my prayers. So what would you say?
If I do the same thing and I do it to Allah and my prayers get answered, I think, but I don't know how he...
No, you're on the right track. You're on the right track.
I did the same thing to Allah, and if my prayers are answered, I can very well tell you that it was Allah who answered my prayers. It still doesn't prove that Jesus is God.
Right. What I would do for this type of situation is I would go to something more basic. Right? You're on the right track. Say to that same Christian, when the animist, people who worship the spirits of the trees and the rivers, you have some people like that, right? On the Andaman Islands or whatever, these Neolithic people, what do they worship? The trees, spirits, right? They worship the spirits of the trees. When that Neolithic person raises his hands and prays to the spirit of the tree, and his prayers are answered, who answered those prayers? You ask him that way. Who answered those prayers? Was it the tree that answered the prayers? Of course, the Christian is going to say, no, it was God. It was God who answered the prayers. Right? Naturally. Not going to accept that the tree answered the prayers. Isn't it? So, we say, well, that's the same thing for us too. You raise your hands and think it's Jesus answering the prayers, but really it is the God of Jesus, the one to whom Jesus prayed. He is the one who answered the prayers. So it's good for you to take them back to something which you commonly agree on, right? Because if you take them to, well, I pray to Allah and Allah answers my prayers, so how do you know it was Jesus? That's more confrontational. You understand? But when you take them to a commonly agreed basis, that it wasn't the tree answering that tree worshippers' prayers, they will tell you right away, no, it was God. Then you take them back to what they did and say, well, that was also God. The one, and you add that little point, the one to whom Jesus prayed.